Hey, as usual with these videos, I'm reacting to something. So what I'm reacting to today is, a few video trailers that I saw for upcoming comic book series, in which the creators congratulate themselves on their own creativity. Um, they talk a little bit about how awesome these new characters they've created are, but most of the video is about how awesome they are. And these creators are, for the most part, tourists in the comic book industry. They're traveling through the comic book business as a stopover, a stepping stone, a resume enhancer, so they can tell people at their next gig how ironically cool and hip it was to work in comic books. Um, it's not a career for them, in other words, like it is for myself and hundreds of other comic book creators. Who today, thanks to these people, are either unemployed or underemployed in the business or seeking different ways to get to the comic book readership that's out there um, through crowdfunding and independent publishing and the rest of it. So, in these videos, these people talk about the great innovations they're making in comics, and they don't seem to know anything at all about comic book history. That that their innovations, in fact, were done before and done better and invented by the comic book creators that came before them. And I'll get a little more into that later. But in one video, the creators are congratulating themselves on creating a cohesive, complete world for their characters, as if that's something no one's ever thought of before. Uh, Post-war at Fawcett Publications, Fawcett Comics, um, the team that was working on Captain Marvel Jr. made a concerted effort to create a consistent environment for Captain Marvel Jr. This is like a first in comics. They drew maps of the town that Freddie Freeman lived in. And they assigned, people that lived in houses, people that ran businesses. So that when Freddie went to the drugstore for a soda pop, it was always the same soda jerk. When his mom or whoever, we didn't have a mom, when he went to the butcher shop, it was the same guy behind the counter. And the idea that they had was a brilliant one, is that this would make the world as believable as possible for the reader, and the reader could really invest themselves in this world of Freddie Freeman, and they would know his world as well as they knew their own. Creating on paper a virtual reality or a simulated reality. So yeah, it's really nothing new. Another thing is, I saw some creators congratulating themselves on the fact that they had written backstories for their characters. Who their parents were, their likes and dislikes. What I call a uh, a Playboy Playmate, you know, questionnaire. And I don't do this. When I write, I kind of explore the universe and build the universe as I go along. But John Ostrander, he does that. John Ostrander builds his entire world on paper. He goes into great detail about his characters, knowing full well that 80% of the material he's coming up with won't ever see the light of day in the comic. But what it does is it helps him inform himself about these characters to keep them consistent. And this was especially helpful for him when he was working on titles like Grimjack, which had extremely complex continuities and complex environments. It was a lot to keep in your head, and so John would put it down on paper. And he does that routinely as a writer. I don't. I have a different approach, but every writer has a different approach to their work. And as long as you can't argue with the results. Another thing that these creators were congratulating themselves on was that their characters were kind of Ishmaels, Luke Skywalkers. They were entering this larger world, and we would see it through their eyes. And this one writer actually said that this was the first time this had ever been done in an X-Men comic. Okay, if you're as an uber nerd as I am, that's wrong. So yet another claim they make is the amount of time, the incredible amount of time they spend working up the details of their different characters' lives and how hard their artists are working at creating, supporting casts and environments and everything else, as if no one's ever thought of this before, as if this wasn't de rigueur for every comic book creator who ever lived, from artist to writer, is you basically um, work hard behind the scenes, off the page, to create the objects and characters and environments that the reader gets to see. And the reader, rarely gets a glimpse at how hard an artist works at world building. Every bit as hard as John Ostrander works at world building, and every, you know, lazy me, I don't do that. But artists have to do it because they're going to have to draw these characters again and again and again, and they're going to have to be consistent. I mean, if the comic book's going to be any good, the art has to be consistent. So there's things they have to think about, and they've got to get it down on paper first, and then continue to use that as reference, as you can see in the brilliant work here, done by artists across the generations. That they, I'm kind of vamping here so you can see some of these. Um, you know, to work out the details. So from the beginning of comics, this has been the process, and yet these newbies, these tourists, think that they've reinvented the wheel, which they have not. The wheel was invented by people that came before them. And I'm sorry to tell you this for the diverse crowd who resent the fact that they've inherited this medium from a bunch of white guys. Well, first of all, that's not entirely true. And well, you inherit something that's been in existence for this length of time. You're obviously going to inherit from your forebears. I don't care what medium you're working in. I don't care if you're in theater, movies, television, prose. People did it before you. And you need to know what they did, and you need to be curious about their process. And you have to honor that. Now, the thing about it is that if you're ignorant of the past, you're going to make a lot of the mistakes they made, and you're not building off anything. And the thing about comics, it's pretty much unique in all of the entertainment medium, is you have 80 years of continuity behind you in most cases. If you're working on an established, legacy character, you've got decades and decades and decades of stuff that came before you. Classic, iconic stuff that established the basis for what you're working on. And you can't go tearing that up. You know why? Because generations of fans loved it. And you can't just rip it up to make a name for yourself. You've got to honor that. You've got to pay homage to that. And you've got to work within that framework. You can't just be, breaking everything up because, you're a genius and you know how to do it better. Because trust me, you don't know how to do it better. You can build on it. You can work in the shadow of these great men and women who came before you, who built the world that you're working in. Or you can, break your arm patting yourself on the back every day that you've thought of it all. And I think that's what bothers me the most. I mean, I went into this business with nothing but respect for the people that came before me, admiration, love for the people that came before me. And it kind of annoys the living hell out of me when I see people willing to stamp on that, basically dishonor it. And in the end, they're also dishonoring the fans who supported this stuff. And I know, it's a lot of overgrown nerds. I'm one of them. But by dishonoring what came before, you're dishonoring what worked before. Do you understand? These characters are around for a reason. They're around decade after decade. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, whoever. They're around decade after decade because they worked. The audience responded to them in some way. And sales went up and sales went down. But that was up to the creators, that was up to the publishers to maintain that. But to completely abandon what went before or alter it because of your own ego, you know, I'm sorry, it's wrong. Learn your history, learn your comics, be serious, realize that you work in the shadow of the people that came before you who created all this great stuff, true genius, and, have fun within that framework, but if you're not dedicated to comics, if you don't love them enough to make it a vocation, then move on. Go work for a basic cable channel or go write your play. But leave the rest of us alone. So anyway, let's end on a little commercial. Why not? My ongoing comic from Arkhaven Comics, Avalon. It's available on Amazon. And if the comic shops ever open again, you can order them there. So that's it for me. I am sorry about the grandpa still happening haircut, but the barbershops are all closed. Sorry. Anyway, see you all down the road. Hope this was edifying, educational, and to those people that I'm criticizing, hey, welcome to the wonderful world of comics. It's a snake pit. I've been there. I've been bit. And now it's your turn. Talk to you soon. See you down the road.